Alrighty. Andrew O'Brien is a co-founder and builder at OpenQ. He joins us here today. Welcome, Andrew.
Hey, how's it going, y'all? Good to be
Good,
here.
Robert. Good to have
Hanging
you.
out with Eugene.
That's right. Do you think you could give a very quick summary of what OpenQ does for non-developers and non-technical people?
Yeah, totally. So I like to think of it as like the easiest onboarding ramp for developers. That means finding developers, getting paid as a developer, and even offboarding as a developer. So I'd say the place where all the code exists is GitHub, and we work where you work on GitHub, allowing you to, without changing platforms, get recruited and paid. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I'm. Yeah, go for
one
it.
other thing, one other thing that it lets you do is if a developer is merging some code that they've made with a bigger code base,
Yeah,
an organization can attach a crypto bounty, so a bounty of money,
yeah.
to that merge, and so then the developer gets paid automatically when the his code is merged with the organization's code, and so that way the developer doesn't have to go chasing after the money. So it makes things more convenient, and you don't have to use banks for escrow services as a developer or as an organization.
Man, I'm so proud. That's exactly it. This is why we have you, Eugene. I'm just back here like coding all day, just like garbling the description of my own company, and then Eugene comes in. That's why you hire people that are smarter than you.
Uh, thank you, thank you. Okay,
But yeah, that
close
that,
your.
that is it. It's really just being a well integrated payroll system to start. Basically, is what it is. Yeah.
So, how'd you get into crypto?
I kind of parachuted into it from like a lot of IRL meetups that I was going to back in the day in Detroit around like 2018. Honestly, I got in what I would say I felt pretty late because I was going to these in-person meetups in Detroit in like random warehouses and stuff and meeting really cool people. And at this time, I wasn't even a developer yet. I was just a product management intern at Quicken Loans in Detroit. And just going to those things and kind of realizing what everyone was building there, I just pretty quickly knew that I wanted to be a part of it. So started to learn how to code from that. But I'm pretty blessed. Like a lot of the people from those days have now moved to Austin, and we still hang out and code together here. But I really started then, 22 now, 2022 now, so about 4 years ago or so. But yeah, I have a lot to I owe a lot to that city.
Uh, it's very interesting. It sounds like going to warehouses to talk about Web3. It's very countercultural. How'd you find out about these meetups?
You have to have weird friends. It helps a lot. I mean, it was basically Detroit's a tiny place. So in terms of like an ecosystem, it's 139 square miles, the city is, but only about a mile and a half is what would be considered like suburban kind of developed city core. So it was a tight knit group of like really talented people. So I'd meet them in coffee shops, meet them around. And because it's so tight knit, I like kind of slowly started to realize that this guy or girl that I know from over here somehow knows this other one that's also in crypto. So pretty quickly, the whole web was kind of drawn for me within like a year. So yeah, that was really it. And honestly, just because in Detroit there was like nothing but abandoned warehouses that you can make your own space, which is one of the great things about it. So like that grittiness combined with the DIY nature of crypto really appealed to me. So
Nice,
that's when I started getting into it.
nice. You said that you started to teach yourself to code. How did you become a developer?
Jeez, yeah. So I mean, fresh out of school, I literally switched majors a bunch of times. I was planning on going to LA and getting into post production. So essentially being like a cinematographer and color grader, that kind of thing was what I was more or less trained for. But I also just loved Detroit from when I was visiting and everything. Um, so basically, I was a product management intern for a while. And at least at that point in life, it felt like every business meeting I was in was people kind of like asking what the devs are doing. Where's this at in development? And I'd had enough dev experience from doing computational linguistics to be like, all right, I could like look in this code base and see what's going on. So it kind of just slowly happened where I kind of asked so many questions that I ended up in the code base and more or less never left after that. I just slowly became better friends with the developers than I was with the business side of things and enjoyed it a lot more. So I actually convinced another team to create a software intern position on one of the groups. And then I applied to that. So I kind of like socially engineered my way into software engineering since I didn't get a CS degree. So I used that like position as a product management intern, not even like a full-time thing. I'm talking like 30 an hour or even less, like 20 an hour kind of job out of college. And I just kind of hijacked it to turn into a software engineering position. Um, yeah, so that's kind of like the how I got into it. It was a whole ride after that, but we can talk about that later. Yeah, I was just elbowing in.
Do you have any tips for other people who might be listening who also want to engineer their own role as a software engineering intern at a company?
Yeah, I mean, I always like to say like write a check and then fill up your bank account before they cash it. Like I was definitely overselling my skills at the time, but it was only because I did trust that I was going to be putting in those hours. So they'd be like, "Oh, do you know React?" Which I didn't even know what it was at the time. And I'd be like, "Yeah, I know it." And they're like, "Okay, cool. Like you have an interview tomorrow or whatever about it." And like that night, I would just go hard on it, you know? So like don't there's way more to lose by underselling yourself than by overselling yourself. You can oversell and you just end up having a bad interview. That's whatever. If you undersell, you're going to be missing a ton of opportunities you might have had otherwise. So yeah, I'd say like oversell a little bit, but make sure that you make up the difference before it comes time. And I mean, there's so many resources for that. So yeah, just be confident in what you're doing and go for it.
And you said you studied technical linguistics.
Yeah, I mean, it was all over the place. Like, linguistics is a pretty cool subject in that, like, it goes everywhere from like sociolinguistics. Like, I know people that literally have PhDs in the difference in pronunciation of the word, like letter L in different parts of Washington, D.C. Like, that's an actual area of study, like socio, all the way to people that make software language like compilers. So yeah, like computational linguistics back in 2017 was, or NLP, like natural language processing, that was much more based on like Python scripting and a lot less machine learning. But like from 2017 to GPT-3, it's completely different now. Like it's pretty crazy. I mean, everything that I learned as like an NLP major essentially is blown out of the water by what's come out in the past 2 years.
How have you found that linguistics has helped you as a developer? I know you mentioned that you started to learn how to code in order to be good at computational linguistics, but any other skills that it's
Yeah.
taught you?
Well, it's kind of funny. Like I've encouraged a lot of people that don't know what they want to do after college, like I did, to try out linguistics. And like, here's why. It makes me sound like a bit of a con man, which I promise I'm not. But linguistics can like, it's incredibly horizontally mobile. So like I used it in part to like get a job as a product manager, talking about the sociolinguistics, the language skills, the negotiation skills that you study pretty directly. It's useful for marketing. Almost anything you can imagine, there's some Venn diagram or intersection with linguistics to it. So with programming in particular, I got really interested in like compilers, even during college, just like out of pure curiosity. Like it was just another form of translation, like English to French. This was a highly formal version of English called a programming language being translated into machine code. So I got really interested in that stuff. And like a lot of the internals of compilers are the same kinds of syntax trees that you see within like a grammar class or like a syntax class with linguistics. So when it came to trying to convince someone to like trust me with my hands on the keyboard behind a code base, it kind of de-risked it a little bit because I talked up the technical aspect of linguistics. And then if I'm doing something more social, this is back when I needed to like get a job. It was like a great thing when I was like 22. It gave me like a lot of mobility within that. So, I mean, linguistics is just everywhere within comp sci as well. I mean, I'm super interested now in like the new languages coming out in the blockchain space, like Move, Viper. All of those are like, from a linguistic perspective, increasingly interesting.
You said you tried a whole bunch of different courses in university. Did you take programming there? And if not, why not?
No, I never did. Well, I went to yeah, no, I had like a more like liberal artsy focused college. There was like we didn't even have an engineering course actually. So the closest I could get really, I mean, we did have a comp sci major. That's not true, but it was never really a focus. And I kind of already got that feeling around 2017, like what I need in terms of actual development I can get online. So might as well take other classes kind of. Um, yeah, that was like at least one thing. Um, yeah, I just felt like anything I needed I was getting online and from other tutorials. Yeah.
What are some advantages you feel that you have as someone who's taught yourself how to code?
Yeah, I mean, like when I first started coding, I thought you just do those hello worlds when you first start coding, and then maybe after that, you never again have to do hello worlds. Like it turns out, just throughout your entire career as a dev, you're going to be doing many hello worlds just to try out new things. So that ability to like go from completely fresh on a subject to, all right, let's just deep dive this thing, rabbit hole it, and come back up with what you need. That kind of mentality of self research was pretty good. I mean, most like my day was basically going, doing product management at Quicken Loans, and then coming home, having dinner, and then going, walking back to the office and just doing tutorials for like 3 to 4 hours until like 10, and then going back. So it was like me and the janitors kind of thing. So like that mentality of like I didn't really have anyone to ask questions to at that point either, which kind of sucked, which is part of why like I like mentoring now. So it's quite literally just every thing I had to learn, I had to build on my own, at least to start. And then I was blessed with some mentors later on. But yeah, you just gotta grab it and go for it. It's you can't wait for anyone else to grind through those tutorials for you.
You mentioned earlier how you oversold yourself and then you studied up for whatever it is that you had sold yourself on. Were there any
Yeah.
times when you said you knew something and then you didn't finish learning it in time, or you couldn't learn it and then it was
Um,
exposed?
we had like some buzzer beaters. So like the Quick at Moans job, I actually ended up getting laid off from that after only 2 months, working in the software engineering like internship they had. End of year bureaucratic kind of, we have a hiring freeze, this and that. So I think I did a good job at that. And quite literally the day that I got laid off from there, I went to a meetup. Once again, meetup save everyone. I went to a meetup and just walked up to one of the guys who was hosting a panel on software engineering. I was just there for the free lamb, and basically said like, hey, I moved to Detroit to work in tech, to work with a startup. I just got laid off today, and I have like these skills. I'd be curious if you guys are hiring. I didn't even know what company he worked for, but he ended up being the one that hired me for the next job, which was with Integral. But yeah, so that I'd say like interviewing for Integral was that was the second step of like going from just a 2 month internship to like a full-time gig. And that one was all in Java. So I'd never done anything in Java. And those who know it's like quite a behemoth of a language. So he was like, "Oh, do you do backend with Java?" I was like, "Yeah, I could do that." Like, basically just trying to get to the next step. So and you just kind of go home and start studying that instead. So there were some points where, like, within that, it was definitely clear. Like, I thought that they were probably saying, like, "Why'd you send us this kid who doesn't know shit?" But I think I knew just enough that they're like, "All right, let's bring him on. Let's see how far he can go." The 1 month probationary period type deal. So yeah, they were like nice enough to bring me on, and I got great mentorship with them. And I haven't really had to, since those early days, fake it till I make it quite as much. But in those early days, it definitely helps. And I feel like that's kind of like, I don't know, like when you put yourself into a corner, it's pretty great motivation for actually learning something. So maybe I'm just like a procrastinator and I need to like put myself into crappy situations to learn it. But yeah, I mean, it was like, wow, this interview's coming up in a couple days. Like, I better get on this now. It really makes it clear how little time you have.
Got you. Were there any other barriers or obstacles that you faced because you were self-taught as a programmer?
Um, I think it was just made it harder getting into it initially. Like that time that, the 4 years that people put into like engineering to like land a job quickly after college, I kind of just like put that into like a 6 month intensive self boot camping. Like, yeah, it's tough because there's somewhere in between. Like, so you have the college route for studying software engineering, basically learning algorithms and data structures and hardware that you probably won't use in your day-to-day job. And then you have the boot camp route where you don't learn a lot of those fundamentals, but you go directly into like incredibly practical things. It's like becoming an engineer versus mechanic kind of thing. So I will say, like, on that thing of being like either a software mechanic, like I'm just fixing the boat, keeping it going along, and like an engineer where like you're blueprinting new compilers, new this and that. I do kind of regret that I never got that exposure to like the data structure and algorithms things. I learned it a bit later on for interviews, but I think it would have been quite nice to like study at a more leisurely pace somewhat during those like 4 years. that could have been nice. But I think that even with that, like I think there's so much great stuff online. Even like diving into the EVM, for example, would be a place where it might have helped. But even then, like there's so much great stuff online covering the EVM, Solidity, compilation, bytecode. I feel like you can still get up to speed. May just be missing some of the mental models that your peers who did actual engineering degrees got, but it's not something that is entirely impossible to make up for.
How did you then start to really hone your coding skills? Were there any things that you did aside from your day jobs?
Yeah, I mean, I had a pretty weird approach to learning languages in general, like with JS and stuff. I know that most code camps encourage you to like immediately get into like building projects. For me, I kind of took a weird approach of like kind of like learning all the keywords of it and then thinking of it as like a language and how you're able to combine those things. So just starting out with those is like they're the atoms of the language, and then building up from there into like single script. I think it goes like basically having like single file projects, then learning how to import it, having multi-file projects, and then from there actually getting to think about architecture, but only once you really need to. I think it's kind of a mistake to like throw people into a position where architecture is the limiting factor to what they're able to build. So yeah, I mean, like for building up from those like very small primitives, just like kind of worked for me. I'm not sure what else. Yeah.
Any particular websites that you used or
Oh yeah.
tutorials?
Yeah, I mean the very first, it's funny, I opened up my Udemy the other day and like went through the history, and it was almost like a memory book of like the past 3 to 4 years. But the very first one, so Udemy has the flash sale model. They're always on sale. Don't worry about it. Just create a new email. They're always $10. So Udemy was pretty quality. Udemy, Egghead, Pluralsight. Um, I never did free code camp, but those are the three that I just like demolished as much as I could through like all the different years. But yeah, first one I did was this like Ethereum Solidity boot camp on Udemy that was $10. So that was like getting into React, getting into smart contracts back in 2018. Yeah, that was a good one. So I'd say Udemy is really quality. Egghead's really good for like intermediate stuff. It doesn't do the thing where like you'll have an advanced question and they say, okay, we're going to start a new project. And I'm like, oh, geez, just like skip to the point. So Egghead is more for like advanced specific things. But yeah, I'd say those three sites, at least back in my day, were really good. Um,
So,
yeah.
and you also mentioned that you did a bit of backend work. Someone asked you about backend. When did you
Yeah.
start getting into Web3 and how did that happen? Like
Yeah. So I
from a
mean, I did.
coding perspective.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, like I got into coding because of Web3, like I said, but I never got into Web3 full time really until last year. So I kind of did like 4 or 5 years of Web2 from Quicken Loans, working there mainly on Angular front ends and stuff, and then from there working in automotive industry at like Ford Autonomous Vehicles, rest in peace, for like that was an iOS dev. We did routing algorithms in Java, did some mapping stuff in React, and then from Ford after that, like COVID hit, so I just basically went home and worked on what I want to work on and started to learn Wolfram language, and then eventually went to work at Wolfram Alpha as like a site reliability engineer and doing like Kubernetes and Docker stuff. And then finally, after while I was at Wolfram Alpha, um, is when I met Rick and everything in the hackathons, the Chainlink hackathon. So I guess that would be it. It would be doing hackathons online was what kind of got me out of Web2 world, which was indispensable. I couldn't do like anything I'm doing now if it weren't for those like 4 years of like industry production environment stuff. But yeah, it was really hackathons that got me into it and out of Web3 and made me think like, okay, I could work on this full time.
Do you remember the first hackathon that you participated in as a developer?
Yeah, as a dev in general, the first hackathon I was in was it's actually a cool one. It was Bose and Universal Records. So they came to Detroit. So like Detroit is a pretty awesome music scene, like Motown Records. So it was like a partnership between Bose headphones. They had a new AR, like audio AR. It was pretty cool. If you have a QC35, they have this capability, and they just put it into iPhone AirPods as well. So like with these, got the little. There we go. It says "fuck Apple" on it, but that's a long story.
But not
Uh,
fuck, it's FUK Apple.
Yeah, so Apple
engraved into the AirPod
they
case.
block they're very anti-swearing at Apple. Steve Jobs hated cursing. So yeah, I don't know. I inscribed it with that, and it took them too long to mail it, so I had to mail another one. So now I have two AirPods that both say "fuck out" on them. But no, it was a Bose hackathon where they were using spatial audio combined with iOS stuff, so you could like walk around a room and experience different sounds depending on where you are in it, with this like head tracking technology. So I was in that. I literally forget what was the project. It was like you walk around Detroit and hear like old timey sounds or something. So I think our demo was like you had these Bose headphones on and like just walked around the block and would hear things about Motown records and stuff. So that was the first hackathon, and I was like, oh, cool. This is like a fun weekend, you know? Um, yeah, and then I started to get into like all the Eth Global online ones and all the like protocol specific ones, and those were just all so fun. So I just kept on going with those until, yeah, that was about it.
How'd you start contracting as a developer?
So I guess like with Integral, I was a contractor slash consultant. I always say the difference between like a contractor and a consultant is basically just the rate. So like if you want to sound fancy, call it consulting. If you are just, want to be real, contracting consulting, I still don't think anyone's given me a good definition on the difference. But um that was the first time I was contracting, as in like you get recruited and you get billed out hourly, and then your recruiting firm slash group keeps a portion of the difference of what they get paid by Ford to what they pay you. um and in terms of like hiring, I would use Upwork for hiring on like personal projects. I had like a little project called Localhost that was unfunded little startup I was trying to do. Basically the idea was like it's kind of like a social networking app where the radius is only like 50 feet to like 150 feet. Idea being like you can only make things public about yourself in a small public space, like a cafe or something. Because like how often do you think you might miss interactions with people? So I was basically just building this out as like a side project on iOS because that's what I was doing at work. And I started to like contract out just using my own money on Upwork and GitHub. So like I'd be on GitHub, I'd make an issue, I'd begin working on it myself, and then I'd be like, I don't want to read all the docs for AWS Cognito or something. So I would then go to Upwork and like write a test suite and say like $200 for anyone that makes this test suite pass, and got like a surprising amount of people applying to it. So that's when I really started like hiring people for like dev projects, and like spreading out from there was mainly Upwork and then the contracting that I was doing myself around Detroit.
Did you notice any problems when you were using Upwork or other freelancing platforms?
Yeah, I mean, it worked out fairly well. So like a lot of the escrowing was quite confusing at times. It also was like all of our communication was happening between Upwork and GitHub. And I was kind of like, it would be nice if I could just have all of this be in GitHub, like have like developer discovery, work management, payment, all via GitHub, um, rather than having this kind of hybrid approach that I was doing, where I have like the test suite on GitHub and then I go back to Upwork to talk to people. And then the milestones are released manually after the work's already completed, kind of things like that. So it was just, the classic banking kind of related things, I guess. Yeah.
Gotcha. How did you meet your co-founder, Riccardo?
Oh, that was in the Chainlink hackathon, right after COVID. It must have been November 2020. Yeah, so that was we were working on Chainlink at that hackathon. I was working solo back when I lived in Medford, Mass, and I was building out this thing where you merge a pull request and then Chainlink oracles are able to detect that and pay out money that was in an escrow. And I saw that him and a guy named Marcus were working on basically the same thing. Only I saw from the repository that it looked like they'd started quite a bit earlier, and I could tell that Marcus and the other devs were quite a bit more advanced than I was. So I saw that like in the project channel, just scrolling, and I ended up messaging Rick and just being like, "Hey, I like your project. It turns out I'm working on the same thing. I think I'd rather join your group than continue on mine solo because I like the way that your devs are coding. Like I just admired the quality of the code they were putting out." Um, so after talking to them and them realizing that I had like very specific contracting experience as well, they thought it would be a good fit. So I joined that team. And we won like some small prize. We didn't win anything that big. And we kind of just continued building after that. Me, Rick, Marcus. And eventually Marcus went on to work at Snapshot. So like if you're working on Snapshot, like a ton of the front end is from him, and he's a phenomenal dev. And I just kind of continued on after he left for Snapshot. So that's before OpenQ was like an actual company, or what it is now. So that's when it really kind of went from like the infant stage, or the birthing stage was at Chainlink though. So yeah, that was about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. Good times.
It's it's so cool that you can meet people like that and just start working with them based on the
Yeah,
quality of their code.
exactly, dude. I mean, it's brought me all over the world. Like I never would have thought I'd be going to Berlin for half the year. And that's how it's like always there, like there's always right in front of you that you can be tapping into this through the internet. Like it's to me, that was like the height of what the internet was made for, in terms of like the initial vision of the 90s of a borderless world where we all come together and build great things together. Like that was it, right? I'm in Boston getting into Web3, and I'm just scrolling on this like messaging app, and I find someone, we connect. I learn a lot from them. Maybe they learn from me. And like next thing you know, I'm traveling to Berlin, traveling the world at all these conferences. Like that to me is what the internet's made for. It's not staying behind your screen all the time. It's using it as a jumping off point. So I'm really, appreciative for all that.
Have you met any other friends online through GitHub or Twitter? And how did you do that?
I meet all my friends on Venmo. No, not really. Shit, who else have I met? I mean, Twitter's been like pretty great for just conferences. Like I never went to so many conferences in my life for like Web 2. That's half the allure of Web 3 really, is like just it's so fun and meeting people from everywhere. But Twitter's a pretty good like jumping off point, no doubt. Like I reluctantly got Twitter last a little less than a year ago even. And I've been like pretty adamant about keeping politics off of it and only having crypto and memes on it. So yeah, it's like Twitter. I've met people. Discord. I mean, we meet good devs from Discord, but I never met any like new friends. I guess I don't know. That's a tough one. Not many. I guess that I just lucked out with Rick once.
You mentioned that Marcus had left to work for Snapshot.
Hmm.
What's the what's the timeline from then until the present day when it comes to OpenQ? How did that start?
Yeah,
All of
totally.
that.
So I guess after that, I just kept on working on it part time. Like I was with Wolfram Alpha as well. Like when this was a side project, and yeah, I mean, I guess the next point then was in terms of getting funding, you have to have some kind of financial vehicle to accept the money. Otherwise, the project would have been dead in the water. So I know that it's like some people see it as impure to be accepting funding, but the reality is if you don't have it from your family or you have it from past connections, like you need to pay the bills. You need to have like an actual financial institution that can accept that cash. So part of it was me going over to Germany after that and signing all the docs, hanging out in person, and building the platform up more to be demoable for investment. So getting it to that POC point even took a while. And that's when it was only fixed price contract, merge pull request, get paid. So that itself was pretty cool. I wish that I had like the video of the first like demo because it was horrible. I couldn't believe it. Like I would never have thought that we could have gotten funding for it, but maybe it was the product of being in January, or maybe it was just me being like a dev perfectionist, but it was a cool idea and people seemed to pick up on it. So that was kind of the journey, was going and creating a UG, which is kind of like an LLC, but in Germany, and getting the first investors involved so that we could go full time and hire great people.
All right. Did you have anything else that you wanted to share?
No, I don't think so. Just about this poster, just that's good old Vitalik meme. I think that this has actually become almost like a more of like a vintage meme because this is from
Just
like
for
the 20.
just for context, behind him in the video, there's a poster with "build" at the bottom in big cap letters, and then a buff dude that has Vitalik Buterin, the creator of Ethereum. His head has been photoshopped on.
Indeed.
So
Well
yeah, yeah.
said. Yeah, no, I just made this for ETH Denver, and I was with a guy who runs, what was it, Metis or Metis, who I guess was friends with Vitalik, and they took a picture of me in the shirt and sent it to his mom for some reason. And she was just like, I love my Vitalik just the way he is. He doesn't have to be buff. And I was like, oh, that's so charming. But yeah, the good old Vitalik meme. I think it needs a comeback.
Nice. Andrew O'Brien, thank you very
Yeah,
much for
thank you.
joining me.
Thanks for listening, y'all. Peace.